All right, here we are, on to the next one. This is kind of an ad hoc Teuthology discussion, and I believe Zach is
We got Zach.
poised and ready.
Yes, poised and ready. So I I have kind of a rough agenda of things to talk about today. It's possibly not the most prepared talk ever, but maybe I'll just give a little bit of a status of where things are at right now and what I'm thinking are going to be the next few things to work on. Um, and but anybody feel free to jump in anytime you want. So the first thing, something that's been on my mind a lot lately is documentation. It's been really difficult to keep Teuthology's documentation up to date in the last, well, year or so since I started working on it. And I'm finally getting to a point where things are getting a little bit better. One of the things that I realized is that it's really intimidating to have the README was this giant document that had a huge amount of information, and I think, at least for me, conceptually, it's going to help to split it up into multiple documents. Right now, I just split out the installation instructions into a separate document, and those are all totally up to date now. Even as of this morning, I got a patch from Greg Farnham to add Fedora support to the Bootstrap, for example, which is really nice. That's another little thing that was kind of annoying. Installing Teuthology was not a very well documented process. So that's a little better now. So one of the next things to do, I think I'm going to get a little out of order here in a second. One of the next things to do for as far as documentation is concerned is documenting the setup process of kind of the rest of the Teuthology stack, not just the client side that you'd use to schedule jobs and lock machines and all those things, but to actually set up like the lock server and the queue. And, if you had your own lab, how would you do all this? There isn't cohesive documentation right now, but we are actually in the process of starting to set up another internal lab on some Red Hat's infrastructure instead of the older Inktank stuff. And so as we do that, we're going to be paying a lot of attention to writing down what we do to get all of that set up. It shouldn't be super complicated, but it'll be nice to have it written down. And one of the things that I have on my list to do is as I do the steps that I'm going to do, to really keep an eye out for any rough spots and try and smooth them out, and just hopefully be able to make little commits as I go to just fix the things that I see, because it's not something I've gone through before. So hopefully that'll help a little bit as well. Another thing that Alfredo Deza has helped out with is getting, this is still on documentation, getting HTML documentation generated so we can put it up on Ceph.com. And so a lot of the work to do that is merged into master now. I got it in on like Friday, and I was talking to him this morning about how to get it actually published. And I'll just have to educate myself on creating a Jenkins job that will do that automatically for me whenever master changes. So it'll be nice. There will be much better looking documentation to be able to link to. So hopefully that'll help as well. So one of the sort of major, I guess the next major feature change that is coming down the line is the queue replacement. I did the lock server a little while back, and the queue is kind of one of the last sort of pieces of legacy Teuthology to get switched out. I was initially thinking that I would do this before we deployed the new lab, but I think I may do it just after. It seems like we want to have those resources available for testing. So it may make sense to do it that way. And in the very, very much longer term, a couple of us have this sort of dream of Teuthology switching to a more web-based interface. Being able to schedule jobs in your web browser and cancel them that way as well. I wouldn't take away the command line tools. I would rather just maybe have an API that they use to talk to a web service. So there shouldn't be too much of a change for the terminal behavior. But that, again, that's like a super long-term idea. Another thing that people have brought up is packaging. Teuthology is in the Python package index right now, but the version is quite out of date. Some work should be done around getting a release process together so that we can have like proper version numbers that we increment and keep a nice change log and everything. All those things that a mature project or even an immature project should be doing. So, as usual, I always appreciate suggestions and help and patches and criticisms. That's kind of my summary of what's going on. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to add.
I think the biggest thing for me is that it's going to be great to get the getting the internal lab will be good just in general, but getting that sort of fully documented so that there's a known good set of directions that people can follow to get an instance set up.
Yeah.
We know that a few other people are running Teuthology, right? We know, I think Cerza has one and SanDisk has one, and we had another partner that was trying to get one up. That's been unexpected.
There's at least one or two other, I'm not sure if they're partners or not, I can't remember honestly, that either have setups or are working on it. But I haven't heard from them directly, so I can't say too much about that.
Yeah, we ran into another couple of Teuthology installs at GSOC. Loic remembers, he can tell you the guys, but I think he's since passed out from jet lag, but he'll remember the guys. There were a few more semi-large Teuthology installs that kind of surprised us.
Well, one of them is Cerza. He brought that up to me because he actually ran into, I believe, Kapil Sharma is his name? Sharma, I think?
Yeah.
Who I've been in touch with off and on for several months, and just sort of helping him get set up to the extent that he could. And it sounds like it's working pretty well. I guess he doesn't use the lock server. I need to touch base with him and see what we can figure out. But
and have you played it all with the Docker stuff that Loic has been playing with for Teuthology? No,
he only just mentioned to me that he was looking at it maybe a week ago. I haven't had a chance to play with any of it though. No. I do think it's really interesting though. I told him that I would potentially help out with it, but I haven't gotten a chance to play with it yet.
I think he said it's got it to a place now where it's at least semi-usable. So.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I think the last time we talked about this, we were talking about the context of using an OpenStack API on the back end to provision the test machines. And I think what we originally were saying is that we wanted to like do this big refactoring where we had like a nice clean interface for allocating machines of whatever type, for either from using the lock server or from cloud or whatever. Because the way right now we can do VMs and we can do bare metal, and it's kind of kludgy how it's all hacked together. But I'm guessing that Loic isn't doing a grand refactoring. He's just sort of piecing it together. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's not using the lock server for that.
Okay. Oh, and maybe it just spins up for every job it just goes or something.
I think so. Yeah. So yeah, that is one thing that I'm concerned about, especially since the way that we handle virtual machines right now is really tied up with the concept of creating a virtual machine is the same as locking one. Which would be nice to get away from that, I think.
Yeah. Or at least generalize it so maybe one backend would do that and one wouldn't, or would have that flexibility or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see the capability of having more than one type of virtual machine, because right now VM means downburst Ubuntu Cloud Init machine, and
right.
We kind of seem to want to move away from downburst anyway for some other reasons.
Yeah. Well, I think Docker's using containers. Like Docker seems pretty promising for a lot of tests. Or whatever. Yeah, it doesn't have to be Docker. It can be any Linux container. OpenStack seems like a big opportunity, although I'm not sure how many people have OpenStack clusters that they can just point at. AWS obviously would be pretty nice.
That would be very nice. Yeah.
Would you run into problems with AWS with their layered hypervisor shenanigans? Because I know when I was originally spinning up Ceph clusters in AWS, there was some fun when we were using things like Juju, and like the multi-layered hypervisor thing started pitching fits.
I think there are very few of the Teuthology tests right now that run a VM, so I think it mostly it's just installing Ceph and then running some workload.
Yeah.
So I don't think it'd be too bad.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Yeah, so with all these different potential sort of backends that we can use to allocate resources, it would be nice to come up with some sort of, I don't know, plug-in architecture almost, so that adding support for these wouldn't have to be a refactor every time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, even just, I mean, maybe if one of the sort of key outputs from what Loic is doing is just a strawman proposal for what that API might look like, what the actual surface would be. So I certainly haven't looked at that code in forever, I can tell you.
Yeah, you know, parts of it I've become quite familiar with, but there are still parts that I haven't, you know, really had cause to monkey around with. There are some deep little nooks and crannies of Teuthology that I haven't made my way to just yet. I did mention to Loic when he started working on the Docker stuff that I would love to see some sort of plugin architecture. Maybe he kept that in mind. Of course, I'm sure he didn't start doing that or anything.
Yeah.
It sounded like it was relatively ephemeral, whatever it was that he did.
I'll have to look at that soon. Wonder if I can find his branch somewhere, but I'll do that later.
Okay. Yeah, well, I guess the short term, the things that seem the most sort of key for me are the docs for the new lab, and then getting the queuing moved into it'll be moved into paddles. Is that right? It'll just become another paddle service.
Yeah, most of it is already there. I think there's not a lot of changes that have to be made, but it's one of those things that is so core to what Teuthology does.
It'll be dicey, I'm sure. So one of my pet peeves right now about the way that we're doing the queuing and job dispatching right now is that ignoring just the general manageability of the queue being kind of crummy, is that we basically spawn some fixed number of workers that are pulling things off the queue, and then they sit there and they fight with a log server to try to get machines. And it would be great if instead there was like a central dispatch that said, I'm going to look at the top few things in the queue, and I'm going to see if the resource is available, and if so, then I'll pull it off and start it sort of in one go, or else I will wait, so that we don't have to have those annoying workers.
Absolutely.
One of the really lag.
Yeah. One of the, and then you also have to keep track of how many of which type workers are running, and it's super hacky. We don't have a way to manage it. It is a really naive implementation, and one of the nice things about moving to the paddles-based queue is that we won't have to have separate queues. It'll just be, because we won't need separate beanstalk tubes for each of the machine types.
Right. It'll just see what are the resources that we're contending, and then what's the next thing that wants this resource, I guess, basically.
Yeah. So I'll have to put some time into thinking about how, because we'll still use the workers. I don't know if we'll need a separate process to kick them off or what, but some sort of algorithm to decide, which jobs to even attempt to run. And still be somewhat predictable.
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally the current thing where it basically the workers run the job with -- lock, and the process will try to lock the machines and then go, should be replaced so that there's like a single dispatcher thing that will get the resources, lock the things that it needs, and then spawn a worker and give them to that job in one go. Hopefully it should be more reliable and sane.
Yeah, that sounds like a much better way to do it. And then the dispatch, we can actually, create like a supervisor D control file for it or whatever, so that you can install the package on a distro and have it be a service that starts up when you boot the machine.
Exactly. Yep. With the paddles endpoint and the launcher and whatever else. Cool. Okay. So the queue is already in paddles, but all the work to actually do the queuing and the launching sort of needs to be redone still.
Yeah, so I mean, paddles has it already has a sense of jobs being queued. Right now, that's just a mirror of what Beanstalk D is doing. So one of the changes that needs to happen is right now, so a job ID comes from Beanstalk D. It's just an integer that gets incremented anytime a Beanstalk job gets scheduled. So of course we need to make paddles generate those IDs instead. That's one of the small changes.
Yeah.
And the biggest blocker to doing that really has been I don't have a development instance that actually has resources that I can lock and unlock, and even if they're fake. And it's been one of those. It's been kind of a side task for a while that I have had very little luck with. Getting. I was trying to do with OpenStack and just not having a lot of luck. And I had,
Yeah.
But maybe now with the new lab.
Yeah. Well, you can also just lock a couple of VMs manually or whatever. Just do downburst 10 VMs and then just copy those into your development instance. Database or whatever.
Yep. That's kind of what I tried to do when I was working on the lock server implementation. I got kind of shell shocked because things broke anyway. And, when I deployed them, it was, that's the thing about Teuthology is we kind of are always using it. So,
Yep. Okay. Are there other questions on the Teuthology side? Cover. What's in the does the Teuthology backlog and the tracker actually reflect reality? Do you know?
I think for the most part, I'm opening it right now. We actually had sprint planning earlier, but we didn't have everybody.
There's a lot of stuff in here.
Oh yeah, there's tons. I try to file tickets, for anything that I even intend to get to someday. And one thing that I've been looking to change lately is mixed up in the Teuthology, under the Teuthology project, are a lot of testing related things. So, for example, creating a new test suite for so-and-so feature, which some time ago it did make sense to have those intermingled, but the framework itself is kind of growing on its own. So you've got some things mixed in here that aren't really Teuthology specifically, but more Ceph testing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we could probably separate this out at some point, similar to what we did with Teuthology.git and Ceph QA suite too.
Yeah. Tamil and I have even talked about potentially having separate sprint plannings for QA and Teuthology, like that.
That makes sense.
I think it's one of those things that we'll want to get to, after we get Giant out. Everybody's been kind of preoccupied.
Yep. We're close.
Yep.
It's okay. see, was there anything else on the short term? This is all upgrades. Cool.
Is that everything?
I think so. Yeah,
Cool
use
beans.
paddles as primary queue. That's right at the top. Okay.